today I want to share with you 5 things that really helped me get through my depression. So when I was going through this pruning season, my depression was deep and it was dark and I was really struggling, and there was times where I felt like I was drowning and I wasn't sure if I would ever come through this, but I have come through it, and there were significant things that helped me on that journey. And so I just thought it might be helpful to just let you know the 5 of the things that actually really helped me to get through that depression season, in case it helps you too. So the first thing that I found really helpful was giving myself permission to slow down. Now, this is a big one and nobody can do it for you. You have to do this. You have to give yourself permission to slow down. It's never going to be convenient to have depression. Life is busy, life is fast, there's a lot going on. We all have targets and ambitions and hopes. We all have daily pressures and things that feel like they have to be done today. And they have to be done now. And so there is never a convenient time to get depression. There is never a convenient time to get mental health issues where you need to slow down and focus on yourself, focus on your own health, focus on exploring your own memories and pains and fears. And so just know that if you're waiting for a perfect time and you think, oh, in the future I'll deal with this, you will never find the perfect time. It will always be inconvenient to slow down and to stop and to do this hard work of grieving, of reconciling, of exploring past, of changing, allowing God to change your thinking and your way of living. But that is the first thing that was absolutely crucial. I had to slow down. I had to lay aside a lot of my ambitions and dreams and targets and things that I was building and things that I was even enjoying doing. I had to lay them aside, and there is a certain level of grief even in doing that. In fact, it's a big level of grief when you have to say, I'm actually going to step back and not pursue that thing so hard or aim to get the achievement from it as quickly as I could do, because there are other things that are more important. You are more important than anything you can achieve or do in your life. Your health and your well-being, which is inside of you, is the most valuable and the most precious thing, and nothing compares to that. Nothing is more important than that. So if you are experiencing symptoms of mental health issues, depression, anxiety, or any of those things, you need to value yourself and take the time that you need to explore this and to get the help and the healing that you need, because you are precious. We can't do without you. We need you on this planet. You are here for a reason. And if you're not at your best, then we all suffer, because we are all intrinsically linked with each other. And when we are all doing well, then we all do well. And so, yeah, I really want you to just have permission to look after yourself. If there are things you need to say no to, you have permission to say no. If there are commitments and responsibilities that you need to step back from in order to give yourself the time and space to get your healing, then you have permission to do that. There are things that become non-negotiable. Do you know, there are commitments that we make in life. Like, I had clients, you know, I can't just turn around and go, sorry, I'm not going to give you what you paid for. Do you know, because one, that's not the way that I run my business, and two, I need the money, do you know, to pay the bills on my house. So that was non-negotiable. I had to carry on serving my clients. But there was a lot of other stuff in my business that I could step back from, that yes, it might not be like the best thing for my business right now, but like I have to create time and space somehow to get this healing and to give myself this time. And so if that means that my business isn't going to quite grow as fast as it could, or that I won't achieve the things that I maybe have in the past or that I'm aiming for in the future, that is not the most important thing right now. I need to focus on myself. There may be other things like kids. You can't just walk away from your kids, you know, but a lot of people, if you actually assess the things that you don't want to do, your kids are often not one of them. Like, it's stressful having kids. I don't have my own kids, but I have enough friends to have kids to know that it's very challenging and it's very stressful. But actually, in your deepest heart of hearts, most people want to be parents. It's other things that are getting in the way and stopping them from having the freedom and space to be the parent that they want to be. So giving up something that you actually want to do, which is love your kids and look after your kids, is not the way to go. It's actually assessing what are the things that are actually creating a life that's too complicated, too fast, too demanding, that I'm not actually able to give my best to the things that I do want to give myself to, which is my kids, my husband. You know, there are all kinds of things that actually bring you joy when you're free to enjoy them. So it's about assessing those things that are non-essential and the things that are essential, and being quite ruthless about that and getting rid of all of the things that are non-essential. That yes, maybe it means that life isn't going to quite be quite what you want for now, but like it's negotiable. Like you can get by without that for a period in order to give yourself this time to focus on yourself. So that's the first one, is slowing down. The second one is God's presence. And that was quite a revelation for me in how I started to interact with God, because I think I felt such shame that I was experiencing depression and that I was facing challenges and realities that I didn't know how to deal with and I didn't know how to reconcile with. And I felt like a failure. And so when I was coming to God in my prayer times, I was praying, you know, God, change me, like change the way I'm feeling, or like tell me what to do next, like tell me what's in it. So I was just bringing all my stress and just getting myself worked up into more stress while I was praying. As Steve Furtick said, he said a lot of prayer is just worrying out loud with your eyes closed. You know, and that was probably what I was doing. I'm just worrying out loud with my eyes closed. And so there came a point where I said to Matt, because I was doing all the right things, I was declaring truth, I was speaking in tongues, I had worship music playing constantly, I was studying my Bible for an hour every day, I was serving in church, I was giving to the poor, I was just doing everything that I'd been told that you do to get rid of things like depression, and nothing was working. I was just getting worse. And so I actually took a different tact. And I said to Matt, I think that God isn't allowing me to figure this out because it's got nothing to do with my mind. And he's not letting me change my emotions because it's got nothing to do with my emotions. This is about my spirit and connecting with God on a level I haven't before, and hearing him on a frequency that I've not tuned into before. And so I started exploring, what does that look like if I actually don't try and figure this out, don't try and change my emotions or ask God to change my emotions, just embrace where I'm at and how I'm feeling and just accept it and to surrender to that experience. And then in that place, open my spirit and allow God to start speaking to me. So I started doing something which I now call worship without agenda, which was that I chose 3 songs that meant something to me about where I was at. They spoke to me. I put those 3 songs on a playlist. I lay on the floor, and for those 10 minutes, I didn't think about anything. Like, I didn't think about all my questions and my, what do I do next? And like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. And like, God help me. Like, I just didn't think about any of that. Like, I've got to have the rest of the day to do that. But just these 10 minutes, this was my 10 minutes to rest and listen. And so for 10 minutes, I would just switch off those thoughts and I would just say, Holy Spirit, I want to see what you can see more than what I can see. And I want to hear what you're saying more than what everyone else is saying. And I would just say that over and over to myself while the worship music was playing. This truth was just washing over me. And I started to experience a place of peace. And it was addictive, and 10 minutes turned into half an hour, turned into an hour, and before long I was spending hours every day just resting and listening, because in that place I found peace, and peace started to guide me. God started to speak. It was about 3 weeks until he spoke really specifically, and I was like, oh wow, okay, so that's like an actual, like, I do need to deal with that, and like, and highlighted things that I needed to be thinking about and processing. But until then, there was just this time of refreshing and stillness where I learned how to listen and listen to the Holy Spirit. And God guided me through things. Like that first thing that he said to me after 3 weeks, I was like, oh, I didn't even know like that was a thing. And I think that's why God needed me to be still, and he needed me to be listening, because he was going to say things to me that I couldn't imagine. I couldn't figure this out by myself. I needed him to lovingly guide me on this path of healing and restoration. And so I needed to have my ears fully open so that I could hear what he was saying without putting my own conclusions and assumptions onto it. And so that stillness in the presence of God for me was absolutely vital for getting through my depression, and I believe it will be for you as well. Now, stillness in the presence of God may look different for you. For me, it was putting on my worship music and just stilling my mind and lying on the floor. For other people, like I've got a friend, and she started doing long walks, like an hour or two, and that became her really precious time to commune and talk with God and to listen, and things started changing for her too. So wherever it is that you find you can be still, you can switch off from all the worries and cares of life just for a while. It's not saying that they're not important, that you're not going to deal with them. It's just for a while. And find a place where you can listen to God, even if he's going to say things that you don't expect or that you might not understand fully at first glance. That space where you can actually have time and space to process that. So that is the presence of God. That's the second one. The third one was asking myself good questions. Now, this was quite transformational for me, because the way I started to think about it was that in an old world setting, if a child fell over and grazed their knee, you know, in the old kind of British stiff upper lip scenario, you might say to the child, you know, oh no, come now, it doesn't hurt that much, you know, stop crying, big boys don't cry, or things like that. We understand now in modern society that that's quite an archaic way of dealing with pain and injury, is to just brush it off and say it doesn't hurt that much, you know, just stop crying. That's not the best way to deal with it. Yeah, actually, sometimes you need to cry. Sometimes you need to process what's happened to you and the pain that you're experiencing. So what we now understand as a good way to parent if your child has fallen over and grazed their knee is to ask them 3 questions. What's happened? Where does it hurt? And what do you need? Now, why don't we do that for mental health? So I started doing that for myself. I started asking myself, what's happened? Where does it hurt? And what do I need? Now, they're 3 quite difficult questions, and not ones that we're used to answering in modern society, because we still have a very archaic way of viewing mental health issues, especially in the church, that we're just trying to get it to go away. Do you know, like, no, you know, just be grateful. You're just not being grateful, or you don't have faith, or you're not speaking truth, or you're not. Do you know, there's lots of shame-based beliefs around in Christian circles to do with mental health issues, when actually it's a road that you need to walk. It's an experience you need to go through. And so I started asking myself those 3 questions. What's happened? Now, that is looking at my immediate surroundings. Like, what's actually happened here? Like, there's mechanical things that have often happened in your world, realities that have changed, dynamics that have shifted, and you need to be able to recognize and acknowledge, oh, something's changed here, rather than just beating yourself up, oh, like, why do I feel depressed? No, there's usually an external trigger or triggers that your body is responding to. So you're aware of reality and your instincts are responding, but you may not even be fully aware of it in your mind, that things have changed in your world. So actually analysing and naming and acknowledging the injuries that have occurred, the difficulties that you're facing, the troubles that you're facing, the fears that you're having. So you name those. The second thing is, the second thing is where does it hurt? Now, this is a more difficult question, because where does it hurt is related to, there are often past pains that your current trauma is triggering. And so often it's not that isolated incident that is your main difficulty. It's actually the fact that it's triggering a backlog of pains and traumas and issues that are unresolved or haven't been reconciled to their fullest yet. Because there's layers of recognizing and reconciling with injury and pain and trauma. And so asking the question, where does it hurt, is key, because you're analysing yourself. You're analysing those mental pathways that have been laid, sometimes from very young in your life, that are now dictating the way that you respond. right now. So like I knew a girl who was scared of bananas, like terrified of bananas. Do you know, like it's not the banana that was the scary thing. It was the fact that there was a history of trauma with her, and the banana was triggering that for her. I saw a show with a woman who was scared of oranges, and it was that her brothers used to throw oranges at her when she was a child. So you might think, oh, that's silly to be scared of an orange, like, and you would just poo-poo, you know, and just tell her, oh, just get over it. No, there's a history of trauma for her, and that's why the orange now symbolises her being out of control and subject to injury. And so it's deeply significant for her. And so that's part of the process for me, was analysing, where is this pain coming from? Why is it being triggered? And what is it rooted to? And the third question is, what do I need? Now that is the hardest question of all, and a question that, again, we are not trained to ask or answer. What do I need to feel safe, to feel free, to feel content, to be myself, to be able to live in my freedom and my power? And most people, if you ask them, what do you need? They can't answer, because they've never been given permission to analyse what they need, what their wants and their immediate wants are. That I want to be able to say no to this, or I want to be able to do this, you know, and actually analysing what is it that you need, so you don't just get lost in this pit of despair, but you actually are allowed to say, I need this. I need to step away from this relationship. I need to step away from this responsibility. I need to change my life up a bit. I need to stop doing the job that I hate and do a different job. You know, like whatever it is. But just knowing that there are often practical things that you are able to do to move yourself to a place of more contentment and peace and joy, but giving yourself the permission to ask that question, what do you need? And permission to answer it honestly, even if you think people will judge you, even if you think it's not a socially acceptable thing to do, or it's not a Christian thing to do, or whatever. If it's what you need to restore your mental health and to get yourself back into a good place, then you have permission to do that. So that was the third thing, was asking good questions. The fourth thing is therapy. I didn't actually have professional therapy, although I wish I knew at the time that there is free therapy available on the NHS. I didn't know that. I thought that I was going to have to pay for it, and money issues was one of the things that we had. So I was like, I don't want to pay for this therapy. So I bought lots of books instead, and actually they were incredibly helpful. But I talked with Matt. Matt was incredibly helpful. He was very good at just listening and asking good questions. And now that's the thing that you need to find. You need to find someone who asks good questions. And good questions are like those ones that I just said. What's happened? Where does it hurt? And what do you need? And I wasn't finding a lot of people who either could do that, or they just didn't have the capacity to help me. They either were unable to ask me those good questions and just let me find my solutions. They were just rushing in with their own opinions and advice, or they just didn't have capacity because they were already dealing with their own issues that were unresolved in them too. And so finding people was actually very difficult. They say, you know, oh, like talk to somebody. In my experience, most people made it much, much worse. So I had to be strategic and careful about who I talked to about this. And I found people over time. I actually prayed about it and I asked God, who are those people who have capacity for me right now? And 3 names came to mind, and things really started to change from them. People that I could talk to, who would just listen, who would treat me like an intelligent person who was able to understand her own situation and find her own way out of it without their help, without their advice, without all their opinions. And so finding people like that, trained therapists, I think everybody should go to therapy. I just think that the ability to talk to somebody who's just going to listen, who actually is trained to understand how a healthy brain works and how healthy relationships work, is priceless. And rather than just getting random advice from people who are dealing with their own issues, to actually get somebody who is speaking from a place of generations of scientific research into healthy human brains is amazing. So get to therapy, find some good friends to talk to, don't stuff this all inside. And the 5th thing is a book called Boundaries, and I love this book. It was recommended to me by a friend, and to say that my life has pivoted on this book is an understatement. Yes, becoming a Christian was pivotal, but I became a Christian when I was 4 years old. What the Boundaries book did was enable me to read the Bible with a totally different lens. And I suddenly started to realize that a lot of my Christian and religious thinking and way of interpreting the Bible and understanding how I should live and all was actually, it was all through a lens that had been given to me, which wasn't potentially the lens that I needed to be reading from. And that's why it wasn't working for me. And so to get this new lens, and I am going to talk a lot more about boundaries. I think I'm going to talk a lot about boundaries because I'm like obsessed with them now. And boundaries basically, in summary, is about is the line, the invisible line between me and another person. It's where I end and you begin. It's what's me and what's you. Therefore, what I am in control of and what I am responsible for, and what you are in control of and what you are responsible for. And this principle changed my world. It meant that I no longer felt responsible for people and to do things for people that was actually draining me and making me die a little inside. It also meant that I didn't have to be controlled by other people who had their own ideas about what I should be doing for them, or and actually feeling free to just live my life in my freedom and in my power, and allow other people to do the same, live their life in their freedom and in their power, was revolutionary for me. And so that actually turned out to be the source of where a lot of my depression was coming from. So as I started to tackle that and get a new way of looking at life, at myself and at my relationships with others, I was able to resist a lot of interpersonal drama, a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations culturally, relationally, religiously, and actually start to find what my peace and my joy looks like and feels like, and have permission that I am allowed to pursue that. So those were my 5 things. I hope that's been helpful. If you are suffering from depression, again, just know that you are loved. God is with you. This is not the end. And just give yourself permission and space to do that journey. Explore what needs to be explored. Slow down. Give yourself time. Find that rest in the presence of God. Find the people to talk to who are going to be good listeners and empower you rather than try and shame you and control you. And I thoroughly recommend getting this book, Boundaries. It's by Cloud and Townsend. It's called Boundaries, and it will change your world if it's anything like me. So I hope that's helped.